and West Virginia too. So really, what's the difference here? You know, going back to 10 and 11, we were consuming more than we were producing, particularly on natural gas. And that all changed, as you can see, there right about 2015. And that's what's so exciting with the Utica shale play is we are addressing our own economic opportunities, as well as shipping this gas out of the basin to other places. You know, maybe it's down south or out west. And so looking at this DNR chart here, you can kind of see how things have changed. And we hope that they'll update this one day because we know that the production is just taking off like a rocket. So that's a little bit about our history, but where are we now? Well, you've maybe seen some of these headlines because we are all at home and we're not working and playing and nobody's at school or limited vacations. Oil plunged below zero for the first time ever. At one point dropped to negative $37. Nobody had seen that before. Nobody had predicted that before. And quite frankly, the experts in Wall Street and others were stunned. What does that mean? So there was this weird gap where contracts for oil futures were expiring before the next one was rolling in. It was just a matter of hours. But what had happened is because we know there is such low demand, such high supply, and as you also see, there's no storage, we had this weird time period where we couldn't even give it away just based on the futures contracts. Luckily, that changed. But even in Ohio, when you look at our haulers like Ergon and ARG, they were doing it at 10 cents a barrel. And that was even hard to see here in Ohio. So how does that impact Ohio? So predominantly places like Texas, Colorado, North Dakota, places out west where they mostly produce oil, whereas we do a lot of gas here in the eastern states. Because oil is so low, they are not drilling as much, and some producers are able to either cap wells or shut in wells or choke back production. We are seeing less what is known as associated gas. Anytime you produce gas or oil, you're going to get the other one as well too. Maybe just a little more, a little bit less. So because the folks in West Texas are producing less oil, they're also producing less gas, which down there they don't have the infrastructure to deal with like we do up here. And so that is helping us ever so slightly because there's less gas on the market. And so while it is still low in Appalachia, it's not as low as maybe it could be. The other challenge is we are seeing storage is about 88% full. That's the Strategic Petroleum Reserve down in places like Cushing, Oklahoma, where the feds keep oil, producers keep oil. That is almost full. We have also been told there are approximately 12 oil tankers sitting on the coast of California from Saudi Arabia and other places. We also know there are upwards of 20, if not 30, LNG tankers sitting in Galveston Bay and other places down in Texas that have nowhere to go. And if they came here, they got nowhere to go. And so there's a real challenge with storage right now. Pipelines are being used, oil tank cars are being used, ships are being used. We just are running out of room. So our hope is, our message is to leaders from Trump all the way down, the faster and safer we can get back to work and play, we will start seeing that gasoline being used. The stat I just learned the other day, gasoline demand is only about 60% of what it normally is. Diesel's somewhat holding still because the Walmart trucks and others are still moving, but the airplane or jet fuel is almost nothing compared to what it was before. So we're really seeing overall about 2 million barrels less being used throughout the day, which is just an enormous amount not being used. So that'll be the first indicators. Are people back in their car going back to work? Are they going on vacation? Things of that nature. So that's a little bit about where we are. So where does Ohio rank in this whole mix? You can see on the left from EIA, we consume a lot of energy. We also produce a lot of energy. And I'll highlight natural gas as the 5th largest producer in the US. We also have a lot of refining capacity. And that goes back to our Rockefeller days. So in all, Ohio is pretty well situated, even though coal's taken a hit lately. We do have some nuclear, we do have some renewables. So that's good. We've got a nice diverse mix of production and consumption. Not all states can say that. And that goes back to our big manufacturing history. So maybe you've seen these numbers from Jobs Ohio, which is the governor's economic development arm. But if you go back to 2011, when the Utica really first started, we have seen about $83 billion invested by this industry in your communities. And you can see it broken down there. 57 billion in upstream, that's just drilling, leasing, building pads, things of that nature. 20 billion in midstream, that's pipelines like Energy Transfer and Enbridge, Kinder Morgan, taking that capacity away, and then downstream 6 billion, adding refining capacity, building pipelines to haul and other things like that. So that is really exciting to see that kind of dollars invested here in Ohio. So some name changes as everybody tries to keep up. There are certainly many, but these are kind of the big ones that we'd like to talk about. Chesapeake sold their acreage for about $2 billion to a company called Encino. Chesapeake was one of our first producers here in Ohio. The other one that a lot of folks know, Hess, they sold their acreage to Ascent Resources. There have been some mergers. Clips and Blue Ridge combined their Washington County and Monroe County acreage. They're now a company called Montage. But the big granddaddy of them all was Rice Energy, sold to EQT for a little over $7 billion. There's been some other name changes too. A company called Statoil, which is active in Monroe County. They're now called Equinor because they're involved in more than just oil, a lot of offshore wind. The other one, MPLX, our former brothers at Northwest, are kind of known as Marathon now. There was some name change there as they worked through that process. No doubt there will be others in this time. Not all of our members are going to be able to make it through this. Cash is tight right now. Production is low right now. And there will just simply be bankruptcies. There will be mergers and acquisitions, and the strongest will survive. However, we will come out of this stronger. We will be able to combine acreage, while we will probably lose employees, which is tough and no one is advocating for. These companies will come out leaner and meaner and stronger, and perhaps able to resist the next downturn whenever that comes at the commodity price. So we're looking for that to play out here over the next several months, but hopefully we'll be okay on the other side of it. So some data that we've been talking about for a long time, but we want to be able to talk about not just on a federal or state level, but on the local level. So we looked at a couple of different things using public records requests. What are we doing about roads and what we're doing about local taxes. First up, the ad valorem tax. That is the property tax that producers pay locally where that lateral is, not necessarily just where the wellhead is. So using this example here, if one of our folks put a well into production in 15, 12 to approximately 18 months later, that rate is calculated and the operator is assessed. And again, 12 to approximately 18 months later, that operator pays that tax bill. So it's like a property tax. It's paid 2 years in arrears based on when the well is put into production. So if we look at that, we have been able to figure out that our producers have paid about $141 million in property tax. That's all local. None of that goes to the states or the feds. We anticipate, even with this downturn, when we looked at this data in 16 going out 10 years, that we'll be somewhere between $200 and $250 million in the 8 shell counties, of which Noble County is one of them. Because it's a property tax, 60 to approximately 70% goes to the schools. So it breaks down, obviously the schools get their cut, and then the counties serve as a pass-through. They get a little piece, but they mostly ship it to townships, villages. There's really only one city. The city of Steubenville has a well lateral within its city limits. So this is mostly a township tax after you get through the schools. The other piece that we want to talk about is the roads piece. We know we are hauling a lot of equipment to and from these pads. We're going to tear up roads. Some roads are not just simply meant to haul all this traffic. So learning from our brethren in PA, where the state handles all the roads, we needed a much better process. So early on, we identified what is known as the RUMA, the Road Usage Maintenance Agreement. It's an understanding between an operator and most of the time the county engineer, sometimes the township, that does two different things. It identifies the route we're going to take from the state highway to the county highway to the township road, avoiding things like maybe bridges, a covered bridge or a culvert that's not big enough, as well as the road condition. If you all freshly paved it, we break it, we buy it. But a lot of times, you know, this is Bob's road, which is just some gravel road in a field. That's not going to cut it. So we are required to upgrade that ahead of time, make it nice and thick, nice and wide, stripe it, maybe some guardrails, whatever required. The idea is 2 trucks have to be able to pass, maybe a school bus and a truck, things of that nature. So you look at the 8 shale counties here. Again, these are public records numbers from the county engineer's office. We're a little over $300 million. We're probably more than that when you factor in the last year or so, paving 639 road miles of road improvements. So that comes in by our estimate second only to the state of Ohio. There is no other industry or business sector out there that is responsible for roads like we are. But we need it, so we do it, and it's part of the permit process. And there have been very few circumstances where we've had to submit an addendum or a memorandum saying, hey, we tried to work with a county engineer on this. We couldn't come to some agreement. More often than not, almost 100%, there's an understanding on the route and the road condition. And this is in place today. So the other thing that I'm passionate about, I enjoy doing, I love it doing it, is some of our community giving. Most recently, we came up with about 100,000 units of PPE, mostly masks, some gloves, some face shields, things like that our operators use that was just sitting on a shelf because not everybody's at work and we're not giving any tours right now. So we donated that to a bunch of the local EMAs for them to give it out to whoever needed it. We obviously do our Toys for Tots drive, which we love doing every year. It is a hoot and a half. It's a great way to end the year. Plus, we've also done some food pantry things as well too. So our guys love it. This is home for them, and to get out and do some charitable giving every now and again, it's fun. We look forward to continuing to do that. This is actually National Hospital Week, and when I'm done with you all today, I'm heading out to Trinity Hospital West in Steubenville, and we're doing some lunch and beverages for the hospital staff out there with Ascent Resources, who's actually active in Noble County. So it'll be a fun afternoon there. So a little bit on the snapshot as I wrap up here. These are the 10 most active counties. Carroll County was the #1 player for a very long time. Belmont County leapfrogged them about 2 years ago or so, and it's taken off. They're going to be hard to catch. Harrison County is fast on the heels of Carroll County. We anticipate them to be second not too long. Jefferson County was the other one. They were on the bottom of this list. For whatever reason, the geology there, folks didn't think there was anything at. They have now found what they were looking for and in fact they're producing it. Noble County's pretty much held pretty steady at that 6-7 number. There's a little bit of activity happening now in a couple of townships with Montage, Ascent, and maybe 1 or 2 others. I think Artex is the other one. So you're kind of holding steady on that part. The challenge for you all is you're in sort of that condensate crude oil window, which is we know right now not a lot of folks are poking at. It's really in the dry gas window of Belmont and Jefferson counties. And then there on the far right, you see the companies that are most active. Ascent is by far our largest producer. They are our most active producer. They're our biggest member. They are going to be hard to catch in Encino, inquiring on the Chesapeake acreage, but they are an active producer. The other one on this list was Equinor. I mentioned them a little bit ago. They just crossed onto this list as the bottom 10 here recently. We anticipate they'll leapfrog CNX and probably catch Hillcorp before the end of the year. And then on the far right, you see about 3,000 wells that have been permitted, 2,700 drilled, 2,400 producing. There'll always be a gap between those numbers. It takes a little while to get a permit, and you got to get a rig and a frac crew scheduled to drill it and get it in production. So don't be worried about those numbers. And then as far as rigs operating, we're about 10 or 12. We're kind of hopping back and forth between those two numbers. For some perspective, we had a high of 59 in October of 14, going like gangbusters. Then OPEC, when you say OPEC, you really mean Saudi Arabia, met on Thanksgiving Day in 14, realized they were losing all of the market share to U.S. shale producers. They have the ability to flood the market with production because it's a state-owned company, which then drove down the price, which created a 14, 15, and into 16 downturn. We got down to about 9 rigs. We're now back to, I said, 10 or 12. Although they've gotten more efficient, so one rig can drill more wells with longer laterals more efficiently than they had in the past. So that's the upstream. This is the midstream side of things. There are certainly more pipelines than this, but these are the big 5. You see the company name, the project. They are all currently operating except Falcon. We anticipate that to be operational by the end of the year. If you add these together, you're a little over $8 billion investment, which leads to that midstream number we talked about a little bit ago. 1,200 miles of new pipe, but the big number here is the takeaway capacity. We got too much gas. So if we can get it out of the market, our producers can get a better price and continue to drill. So that's 6 BCF takeaway capacity. And the Utopia line is the 157,000 barrels of liquids. So that's a little bit on midstream. Power gen. We did not have any of these facilities until recently. We now have about 5 that are operating. These are natural gas power facilities. We are tracking 12 projects, a little over 10 billion investment, about 11,000 or so megawatts, which replaces about 10,000 megawatts of coal that have come offline, with the ability to power 9 million plus households. The other number you see down here is the 6,000 construction jobs. When operational, these facilities take about 30 or so permanent workers that work 24/7. These are not peak plants. These are going to run 24/7. Some of them are combined cycle, meaning you're able to capture that waste heat, turn that into power as well too. So we've got them up on Lake Erie. We've got them in Central Ohio. We've got them in the Ohio Valley. They are all over the place. We've got a couple that are under construction and a couple that are working on their permits and their financing. But that is all second to these ethane cracker plants, which we are actually awaiting the decision from PTT. Shell Monaco facility is well underway. I'm hearing they are on time, if not a little bit of ahead. They are the largest construction project right now in the U.S. They have almost 80 cranes, 80 cranes on site. That is amazing. 5,000 plus construction workers. We're going to see the same, if not a little bit larger, here in Belmont County. We have not heard much about the Brazilian project in West Virginia, but the experts tell us we can take probably between 3 and 5 cracker plants, which take ethane, which is part of the natural gas stream, turn it into what is known as a plastic pellet, and can turn it into a cell phone, a computer, anything like that. So the idea is none of these exist right now in Appalachia. They're all on the Gulf Coast. So we can build one of these. The idea is we've got the entire production stream here. We've got the gas, we've got the pipelines, we'll have a cracker plant, and then what we can do is encourage manufacturing to build or expand here because they'll be close to the feedstock. Because right now we ship all of the ethane down to the Gulf Coast, they crack it, they put these plastic pellets on train cars, they ship it back up here because the plastics market is in places like Minnesota and Chicago and Ohio and Cleveland and places like that. So the idea is if we can cut out that middleman and just do it all right here, because this is where all the plastic and the end use market is. So that's what's really exciting about it. So the other part here is if you're going to have a cracker, you have to have storage, which we don't have right now. Mountaineer over in Monroe County has their permits for their 200-acre facility. They're going to spend about $500 million in salt caverns, dilute the salt, inject the liquid ethane, and that way it can have storage for these cracker plants. Marathon's possibly looking at one too. We've heard some rumors out there, although not much news there, but they have the ability to do that as well too. Now my favorite topic. I rarely give a speech where I don't talk about my friends in the factory movement. And let me be clear up front here. This is not environmentalism. This is not conservation. This is downright anti-development. We have talked about groups like the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund for the last couple of years. What they do is go into cities and try to ban direct gas drilling. They have had very little success. They try to do that on the ballot. They have been able to pass 5 ballot measures. See if you can see a trend here. Athens, Oberlin, Yellow Springs, any small liberal college towns, there's no drilling there anyway. Now the Sierra Club is actually looking at doing it on the back end, where they want to ban the use of natural gas, particularly in homes with no natural gas hookups. So they have an effort underway called Ready for 100. What they want to do is be 100% renewable by the year 2050. And they want to do that by banning the use of natural gas, again, in homes and in businesses. They are actually succeeding in this in places like California and New York. They actually have 10 states that have signed on. In places like Maine and California that say we're going to be natural gas free and other utilities by 2050. What they don't say is how they're going to do that. The challenge is, as we talk to our friends in the realtors and the home builders, they are not interested in building homes that don't have natural gas hookups because that's not what people want. They want to be run their stove and their hot water heater, things of that nature. And so we have been talking to elected officials in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati and their suburbs because that's where they're starting in Ohio. Again, they're catching traction in places that you wouldn't think, some Bracknell and some nicer communities around Cleveland that you wouldn't expect them to target, but they've targeted. So we are working with others, Dominion and others, to say, hey, let's talk about what this actually means. Because if you're going to ban fossil fuels, does that mean, what about your Parks Department F-350? You're going to allow them to use that? What about that generator at your hospital? You're going to allow them to use that? They're not thinking about that. They're just saying, hey, this is warm and fuzzy. We're all for it. Let's talk about the unintended consequences. So if we can get in and talk to elected officials about that, kind of slows this down in some of this nonsense. These are mostly photos. One of them is not from Ohio, but the other three are from Ohio. Protests that we have been over the years. Boy, these folks are something else. A lot of this is down in Columbus. One of these photos is up in Cleveland. There's no talking to these folks. There's no rationalizing with them. What I love talking about is using these, you'll see in the far right, that's a plastic sign. Plastic is made from fossil fuels. They don't like talking about that. The sign on the upper left, that's black carbon ink. That comes from fossil fuels. I love talking to them about that. They don't necessarily appreciate talking about the polyester in their clothing, which comes from fossil fuels. Anyway, I belabored that point, but I love talking about those pitfalls. So just a recap of where we are here. Long history of development in Ohio. We have both large producing communities, large consuming communities. We're in a downturn now. We've been here before. We'll probably be here again, but we'll be all right. 83 billion invested. We do have about 200,000 jobs directly connected to this industry. Hundreds of millions of dollars paid in taxes and road and fares. We are the organization on energy. So if you have a question now or later, please feel free to reach out. And we partner with other groups like Women in Energy and UJEEP, and we think there's great partnerships there. We love working with other groups like you all to talk about this industry. So that's a little bit about, my name is actually Mike. I borrowed the wrong slide here, but Matt Hammond is the president of our association, and Matt or I would be happy to answer any questions you have. So that's a little bit about us. What do you all want to talk about now?
Mike, could you do me a favor? I hit the record button a little bit too late. Would you mind going back to your first slide and then doing the first oil well slide again for us so we have that on the recording? And then while Mike is doing that, yes, while Mike is doing that, be ready to ask your questions. We'll open it up for about 5 minutes for questions directly for Mike, and then Gwen and I will start our section of the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions again. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
So Ohio has a long history of oil and gas development. Some folks know that, some don't. So we always include in our slides a thorough key well. Folks in Noble County probably know it well, but some don't. So we talk about how, Texas gets a lot of activity, a lot of fanfare, so does Pennsylvania. But we started it, and we like to remind people about that because you can't be where you are today without yesterday. We also talk about at one point, Ohio was the world's largest crude oil producer with John D. Rockefeller and some folks that were active during his day. So a long and proud history in oil and gas.
Okay, there is one question already in the chat, and that comes from Chris Penrose, and he says, do we have any update right now on the PPT project in Belmont?
No, there's been some news. I don't typically follow Korean newspapers, but someone had sent a few links to us that said that they are still actively pursuing this project. The downturn has caused them a slight pause, maybe is the word that was used. But if you've been by this site, there is earth moving equipment there right now. They are leveling some hills and cleaning up from the old power plant that was there. They've got memorandums of understanding with the school district and the local communities on taxes. They're actively working with the state. The state's given some, I think they're up to maybe $20 million for site preparation. So everything you have to look at, it's lining up pretty nicely. And if you compare that to the Shell cracker plant, I think that was going back to maybe the 2012, these take a couple years to get lined up in the financing. I think that's the part they're maybe working on right now, is securing all of the financing. You probably saw they've added Dalim, which is a South Korean construction partner. They've got some financing there. So I think still positive. There have been some concerns about access to ethane during this downturn. I think that's part of maybe what's slowing it down, but still all very encouraging, but no update on release yet.
Okay, at this point, if anybody else has additional questions, you can put them in the chat box, or I'm going to unmute everybody, and then I will remute you when we move on to the rest of the presentation. So I'm going to hit that button, and if you have a question, you can go ahead and speak up, and we'll address it for you.
What do you make of the couple of the majors leaving the area, Chevron?
Oops. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
can you repeat that question?
Yes, I was asking, what do you make of a couple of the majors, Chevron and Shell, leaving the area?
Yeah, Chevron did sell their assets in Ohio to a company called Pinoak, which is actually based in Akron, Ohio. And then Shell sold some of their assets, I think, in PA. You know, those folks can go anywhere in the world. And so they have to line up their Appalachian assets with others. Taxes, rules, regulations, pricing, they have just the more ability to be flexible. They can go to Africa or offshore or somewhere else. And what we've seen is they originally poked some holes in the ground, got some good production, but maybe where the wells are now in their life cycle, it's not worth to a super major. There's about 4 of those. So they flipped them for $100 million or a little more, a little less to a local company, or at least a regional company, and then they go someplace else. So that we're not necessarily concerned about that, because when they offered up the assets, they were bought quickly, and probably going to continue to happen as some of the big guys move out to someplace else to either diversify their portfolio, unload some assets to worry about debt. Some of those big guys have stockholders to report to. Some of the medium and small guys don't, and they can pick up assets on different reasons for different prices. So not concerning, and probably something that will probably continue to happen.
Do you have any thoughts on the check stub transparency bill in front of the in Columbus in front of the legislature?
I've heard, I'm not our policy guy, but I've heard him talk about it. I think we talked to some Farm Bureau folks and I think we've engaged on it, but I'm not sure where we are on that. I'd have to get the answer from our policy folks and get back to you. I have heard him talk about it. We are aware of it.
Mike, we have a question in the chat from Dan, and it says, wouldn't lower ethane prices be encouraging for cracker plants to obtain cheaper crude product for processing?
Yes, but what's happening is that because prices are low, operators are not poking as many holes in the ground because they're not getting as many permits. And so when you produce less natural gas, you produce all the other things that are in natural gas, ethane, butane, propane. So yeah, the cracker plant wants lower natural gas prices, lower ethane prices. That's absolutely a boon for them. But the challenge is our producers getting a permit, getting a rig, getting a frac crew, which are not always available, and then as well as lifting that, processing it, and selling it. There are times where it costs you more than you could sell it. And so the challenge isn't necessarily with PPT or their colleagues, it's with the producers having the ability to actually have the cash to drill for it and process it and sell it. Got to find that sweet spot in the middle.
We have time for one more question before we do the next section. Does anybody have one more question?
Mike, about how long do these bumps in the road last? A couple years and it starts swinging the other way? People maneuver, businesses change their process a little bit, capture a little bit different market, get through that period, and then we start rolling again?
Right. So if you go back to our last downturn, which again, as I mentioned, was kind of in 14 and 15 because of the oversupply. So it's a little bit similar, different reason, but same problem, oversupply, not enough demand. And so, yeah, this could last a little while. A lot of it will depend on states, and whether you call it a lockdown or a travel ban or a safe ban, whatever you call it, the faster we get back to work and play, the less longer the shorter this will be. And so the big test will be this summer. Do folks feel safe, and do they have the ability to jump on a plane and go on vacation? We're going to use some jet fuel. Do we have the ability to get back to work with manufacturing facilities that are closed to use up some of this natural gas? Do we have the ability to get in the car? And do we want to get in the car and go somewhere, whether it's the movie theater or vacation or wherever? So we won't know that for a little bit. And some producers will be able to react faster than others. But the futures price has rebounded a little bit. They do see the light at the end of the tunnel. So perhaps this will not last as long as the downturn in 14 and 15. But we've also never seen negative prices before. So the basement was a lot lower on this one than the last one. So hopefully sooner than later, but we won't know until folks start to get back to work and play. And does the virus spike then again? And do we go back into kind of a stay safe mode, or how are we past all that and we're okay now? Alan, to be determined, but knowing that we have the ability to be responsive to that, maybe this one won't last as long.
Mike and Alan, this week I heard from the Jobs Ohio research team, there's 16,000 planes grounded. That's a pretty big number.
Yep.
And they also shared that, the economists and the researchers, there's never been a model for shuttering a $25 trillion economy at 30% before. So, there's a lot of projections and a lot of ideas out there, but the economists are just, there's a wait and see. Like you say, some of it is consumers have to get out there and be confident again and start spending and get active.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns and a lot of variables too. You tweak one or two of the big states with all the population, you get back to work in California, New York, Texas, and maybe there's a spike again and they shut back down. It's one thing to send Montana back to work. It's another to send California. And so, how does that all play? And then globally too, what happens in Europe, what happens in Asia? Are those economies going to get started again as well too? Can we get those LNG tankers out of West Texas and out of the Bay? Don't know, not sure.
Right. Well, we certainly thank you for your time and your presentation today, and
thank you
taking time to share with folks in Noble County a little more about the state and national picture.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Feel free to stay on, or you can hop off. I know you have lots of things to do today. So
thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time.
Sure.
And I will get the answer to that check stub bill, and I'll get it over to Gwen. I'm not sure who answered that question, but maybe I can get that answer to you. And if anybody reaches out, I'll get a bill number and maybe a status update. What committee, things have moved a little bit slow in the legislature. If it's not COVID related, not a whole lot is moving right now. But I can get an opinion and try to get some information on that. Get it over to Gwen.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and give you a little update from the Noble County perspective. Gwen and I have been a part of the Extension Energy Outreach Program, as well as some of the other people who have joined us on the call. And this is our group that tries to tie together the aspect of the university, extension, research, industry, so that we can have regular discussions about what's happening with energy development in Ohio and how we can serve our clientele, which is you, those of you on this call, to keep you informed and help you making good decisions about what to do with your land, your leases, your community. So our team meets every month. We discuss those ongoing trends, current events, ask questions with each other, and then often have a special speaker on a specific topic. There is a library available on energizeohio.osu.edu. Gwen has been working hard to keep that website up to date for you and keep it well organized. So feel free to access information on that website. It comes from our energy outreach program. I might have a delay on the slides for me, so I just had the slide switch. These are some of the folks who are involved with our energy outreach program through OSU Extension. We have Ken Martin, he was the director of research for a while. Myra Moss, Chris Penrose are the co-leaders for the group. Dan Lima will soon probably become our co-leader, and Dan is on the call. And Eric Romick is our solar energy specialist. He is a regular member of the group and attends all the meetings. Some of our OSU partners representing CERTAN, which is a department within OSU, is Dave Cole and Mike Kaczynski. Mike is really good at about summarizing what events are going on in Ohio and their impacts. And then some of our external partners are Farm Bureau with representation from Dale Arnold, and from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, we have Mike McCormick. And together, we're really proud of what this team does together to collaborate with each other and bring information back to you. And I will never claim to be an oil and gas expert, but if it weren't for this group, I would not have any solid basis of understanding of how this works. So it's been extremely beneficial for me as well to develop, and I hope that our involvement is beneficial for you folks as well. So Gwen, would you like to show them a little bit about the website that we have?
Or as Christine mentioned, the Energized Ohio website is sort of the compilation of the research and information that this team has put together. There are a lot of really good information and resource points on here if you're interested in learning more about home and farm energy tools, the farm energy management process. There's lots of information about Ohio energy incentives and tools and tips, bulletins on sustainable energy as well on this site. So check it out at energizedohio.osu.edu. And then as Mike mentioned, we are sharing some information about Ohio being a leader in oil and gas since the 1800s. You can check out the Thorla McKee well on our newly established Ohio Appalachian Byway right on State Route 78. The oil and gas industry is also strong with our Seneca Marathon Petroleum, which is the former Mark West. We do have Tina Rush on today from Marathon. We appreciate her joining and being a good partner. And as Mike mentioned, the investment in Ohio, according to Jobs Ohio, is $83 billion. Jobs Ohio can use this opportunity then to share Ohio as the place to be, because we do have better cost advantages than the national averages because of our oil and gas prices. Ohio has great access to markets, and also compared to the Gulf area of the United States, we have lower natural disaster risks. And that was a fascinating point to me, is that if you're going to land a manufacturing company, you certainly have to consider natural disaster impacts and risks. And these are, again, just some of the investments in the region. The Appalachian Basin pipelines, more than 3,500 miles, 124,000 jobs, and 27 pipelines. And oil and gas companies have paid more than $141 million in property tax payments. Mike covered this pretty well, close to $13 million in Noble County. And as he mentioned, this goes to the local communities, the townships, the schools, counties that pass levy programs like Ohio State Extension and Noble County. We benefit from those as well. Oil and gas companies have invested more than $300 million in road repairs. And Christine's going to share some more detail on the local horizontal information in Noble County.
For those of you who may not be familiar with some of the terminology that's in the slides, when we talk about a horizontal or lateral well, we're speaking that the well is going out horizontally from the main site of drilling rather than just straight down. And the ability to use those lateral lines has meant there's a lot less destruction on the surface, because you can access more of the shale play from one access point. And so you'll notice that when you look at how things are developing, our newer wells are spanning much greater areas than our old wells were. So you can see those laterals sometimes go, they can cover almost a whole township from one location of the original well drilling site. And so that's what we mean when we say horizontal. It is in fact a horizontal well. Right now, our most recent update as of May, we have 190 miles of pipeline throughout Noble County, and that includes natural gas as well as a few that are hazardous waste, but primarily natural gas. We have 169 producing wells, 180 are drilled, and we have 230 permitted. So as Mike had mentioned before, there's always going to be a gap between the number that's permitted and the number that's actually drilled. It just takes time to get those ready. And then in March, we received word that there are going to be three new permits issued in Noble County with Antero. So we will see those begin to develop soon. You can find lots of information about oil and gas development that's public access at the ODNR website. So if you have never been on there, we suggest you check it out. These are our numbers of wells that are drilled versus producing by county currently. And you'll see that Belmont is there in the #1 slot and Noble is in 7th. And we have, as Mike mentioned, stayed pretty steady in that spot. You'll notice that the red numbers are the number of wells that have been drilled, and the blue numbers are those that are producing. I'm encouraged to see us stay steady in that 6 to 7 placing slot rather than be #1 and then be number 13. I think that's encouraging to see that we continue to grow at a steady pace. And I don't really see this as a competition between counties either. So I'm encouraged by seeing this consistent growth. But you can put it into comparison of the activity in other counties and why you may see more activity communicated from our neighboring counties rather than ours. Because on the grand scheme of things, we're a little farther down the list, but we're still active and still steadily growing. When we look at the amount of product that's coming from these wells, of those wells that are currently producing, in 2019, we had 747,947 barrels of oil, 92,722,000-ish MCFs. And if you're not familiar with what MCFs are, M is the Roman numeral that represents 1,000. So we're saying 1,000 cubic feet, that's the unit. So it's 1,000 times 92 million. And then we've also produced over 1 million barrels of brine, which is one of those byproducts of the well drilling process. This map shows you where brine injection wells are located throughout the state of Ohio. We currently have 7 active wells in Noble County, and this is the site where that brine that's produced is put back into a stable location in our play of the profile. And you'll notice that throughout the state, there's many. We have 7, and that's because we're in proximity to a lot of the active drilling, so it's obviously more economical to transport it a shorter distance. And in these photos, what you'll see is one of the injection wells located near Caldwell in Noble County, and this is what you can typically see on the surface of those brine injection wells. We have done some programming before on brine injection wells, what they look like, the safety concerns regarding them, and how oil and gas goes through the process of creating those. And we'd be happy to share that with you if you have additional questions later on.
Great, thanks, Christine. And as Mike mentioned earlier, there's just a few more slides here on the regional play with the Shell ethane cracker plant in Monaca. This is an earlier view of the site that he mentioned has 60 cranes. It was announced in 2016, and 4 states competed for this project. The complex is in the basin and will produce 1.6 million tons of polyethylene a year. And this slide just gives you a little more information about how that works with the processing plant that breaks it down by heat to create the ethylene, which is a base for plastics. And again, just a closer up picture of the cranes on the site. This is the first of its kind outside of the Gulf Coast region in 20 years. And the Shell Crescent is the area there on the map of the tri-state region that a lot of research has gone into showing that this is the most profitable place to build a petrochemical plant. And again, some site images of the Belmont site that is under construction that's proposed along the Ohio River. Jobs Ohio has invested nearly $30 million in site demolition, remediation, and preparation. And then there are also 2 regional gas fire power plant locations, one in Guernsey County and one in Monroe County. And I was down by the Monroe County site this past week, and there's a lot of activity, a lot of crane action going on there. And then these are just the references from the various stats and information that Christine and I have put together in our presentation today. So you have those if you'd like to read more. And then how you can reach us, as Mike said, if you have questions or if you need additional information, here's how you can reach Christine and myself. And we thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, we'll take some time to answer questions.
I'll go ahead and unmute everyone. If you would like to be muted, please mute yourself on your end so that everybody else can speak. Okay, so you are now unmuted. You can also use the chat box to communicate your questions if you'd prefer.
Do the chat box. I guess I have a question. I don't know if I'm coming through. This is Phil Dobick.
Yep, we can hear you, Phil.
What one thing I haven't seen in all the number of breakdowns for the revenue is what kind of revenue do the injection wells generate as far as you know, I know that here they tell me that it costs about $8 a gallon to take some of this to the injection well. I just wonder what the revenue stream of that looks like for Ohio.
And that is not something I know. We can certainly look that up and get that to you.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I'm happy to.
As I said, Mike might.
Yeah, please don't. I won't take over. I just got a little bit of information on that. So the permits are issued again by the state. So it's a state permit. And then there's a state fee associated for what is known as in-district or out-of-district. It's a fancy way to say in-state or out-of-state. And all those fees go to the state government for the regulatory program to oversee the injection well process.
And I have heard that a lot of our injection wells are taking in out of state from West Virginia as well.
Yeah, West Virginia and PA. Couple of reasons. The US EPA runs the PA program, so the permits just take a very long time to get, whereas I believe in West Virginia it's a state program. The other part of it is geology. Our sandstone is more receptive to taking water than some of the rock in PA and West Virginia. And I think the third issue is that in PA, they were actually for years using municipal waste systems to attempt to clean the water and discharge it. That sort of didn't really work, didn't really take out the total dissolved solids. So we've been using injection wells in Ohio since the early 80s. That is the environmental solution. You put it back where it came from, right? This is salt water that came up with the oil and gas from underground. Some companies are able to recycle it and use it as a hydraulic fracturing fluid, things of that nature. Some of it is taken for dust and ice control, conventional only, not shale. Conventional brine is used for dust and ice control, but the rest of it goes injected back where it came from. Those are probably the three reasons why Ohio takes more fluid than other states.
I have a couple questions for Mike. How important is the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline to continued development and drilling in Ohio? And what are you hearing on the about renewals as leases come up? Are you hearing that companies are continuing to renew leases in the more highly coveted areas, or because of the economics now, do you think they'll be letting them go?
So on your first one, I think those are one or both of those are Dominion pipelines. Atlantic Coast. I think some of them go down to like maybe North Carolina, Virginia. I haven't followed them too much. I think it's Atlantic Coast that's got a federal issue crossing the Appalachian Trail. I think they got a permit, but some people are challenging that. There's also some community challenges down there. This pipeline network is mostly, if not all, interconnected. Will it have a direct impact on Ohio producers? Probably not. I don't know that there's a direct connect. I mean, some of the Dominion system there is, but we don't hear a lot about that issue here in Ohio. I think it's mostly Virginia, North Carolina, maybe other places. And then the question on leasing, haven't heard too much about that lately. We do know that our producers have really refined where the rock is that they like. We know that it's really concentrated right now in 3 counties, Belmont, Harrison, and Jefferson. So if you're in a western part of the play, maybe you don't get re-signed, or if you do, it's a lower dollar amount or less acreage. Haven't heard too much about leasing. What we're mostly seeing is when companies merge or they're acquired or bankruptcy, they're acquiring the acreage that already exists to try to finish drilling it out. We've got a lot more drilling in the acreage that's already been leased. So I think there is some leasing going on, but you don't hear much about it lately.
Any other questions?
Mike, I have a quick question for you. This is Dan from Belmont County. You mentioned the road use agreements in Ohio. Can you comment a little bit about the road use agreements discrepancies between like Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, or even their similarities? I'm just not sure if it's something standardized or if it really varies a lot.
It does vary. The process in all 3 states is very different, and we really learned what to do and what not to do from Pennsylvania. If you're familiar, all of the roads in PA, or at least most of them, are run through PennDOT, the state agency. Whereas we have a very different situation in Ohio, multiple jurisdictions over roads, paving, repairing, all that type of stuff. And we know that the producers in PA had a real problem with working with PennDOT. We also know that PennDOT had a real problem working with producers on just the road repair and the upkeep and all of those issues. So we wanted to do something better, different, smarter, more efficient. And so we do have what is generally considered a standard RUMA that many counties use. I think it came out of either Columbiana County, maybe Jefferson County, that kind of that first one. It has been amended over the years by being added on to other things that have, hey, we need you to do this, we need you to do that. Some townships have their own RUMAs. Most of them are county-based. And then the process in West Virginia is a little bit of maybe both. I'm not as familiar with it down in West Virginia. We more paid attention to what happened in Pennsylvania. It's not perfect, but the RUMA process pretty good. I've been on some of the roads, been on a lot of the roads that have been paved. They're pretty well up, have good upkeep. We did run into issues in Mahoning County. I won't get into the politics there, but if you know Mahoning County, you probably know what I'm referencing. There were some challenges with some local governments up in places like Mahoning, but mostly folks have been really easy to work with. Producers have been very understanding of what the needs are. They've amended their routes. The challenge is that sometimes your GPS will not keep you. They're going to try to take you the shortest route, which the RUMA route may not be the shortest route. It just may be the safest route because there's no steep decline. There's no sharp curve. There's no small bridge. So trying to keep our producers on the route has been a challenge. But overall, I think it's a pretty good process. There was definitely a learning curve. I think we're past that now. So overall, we hear pretty good things.
All right. Hey, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? We do have a few updates for those of you before we end our program today, but we want to give everybody a chance to ask the things that are on their minds. Okay, feel free to chime in if you're having trouble unmuting or anything like that. We're looking forward to doing this again in a virtual format for June and likely for July. If we're able to meet in person in July, we will. But for June, looking forward, we will likely be virtual on the third Friday of June, which would be June 19th. So save that date on your calendar. We're working on a topic right now. One that Gwen and I have discussed is solar energy. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please let us know that you would like to hear about the solar energy talk, more in the perspective of how are things looking in the state of Ohio as a whole, and how does that translate to those of us who are in the Appalachian area. We don't get the greatest sunlight interception here for solar energy. It's a lot better on the western side of the state, but that's not to say that small systems wouldn't work here or be beneficial in some ways. So if that's interesting to you, we can put something together for that or go a different direction. For July, we'll be talking about extending the grazing season with Chris Penrose, who is on the call. So thank you, Chris, for volunteering to be our speaker for that date. Let me confirm. I believe it's July 17th. Yes, it would be July 17th for that talk. So we look forward to that. And I hope that everyone is receiving updates from the Extension Office, whether that's through the local newspaper, our Facebook page, our county website, or one of our newsletters that we send out. We hope that we'll be back to normal before too long, but in the meantime, we're trying to maximize our communication with you through those avenues. Any questions or comments?
Thank everyone for your time today and your attention. Thanks again to Mike for being our speaker and sharing lots of great information.
Thank you.
Are you going to post this like you did the last one on YouTube?
Yes, what we'll do is we'll save the recording and we'll upload it to YouTube so it can be shared in that format. And we'll also post it on the county Facebook page as well.
Thank you.
Mike, would you mind if we shared your slides with people who request a PDF copy?
I will, let me update that last slide. I accidentally uploaded Matt's information, not mine. So let me correct that and I'll PDF it and ship it over to you this morning.
Okay, that would be great.
You bet. Happy to do that.
All right, well, it was a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you, even though we're not in person, and we'll look forward to doing it again before too long. So if anything jogs your memory later that you wanted to ask, feel free to reach out to any one of us by email or phone, and we'll be happy to get back with you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for speaking.
Everyone. Bye.
Thank you.